taking it off. Oh, na na na.
Have you seen how young Filipinas are dressing today? They seem to adapt to the K-pop culture, Western styles, and trending fashions. But do they know something about the traditional Filipino dresses? Or do they even have a clue what does it look like? Good morning everyone, my name is Melissa T. Bautista and here is the short video presentation about the Filipino fashion and its evolution. Young Filipinos have been exposed to traditional Filipino dresses and outfits since kindergarten. They saw and even wear those in many school events. They can also see them in movies and TV shows, the Filipiniana section in many department stores, and many special formal occasions. However, that doesn't mean they know more about these traditional clothes. It seems that they need to dig into Filipino history to find out how they are developed and how they influence their sense of fashion today. Here is the first evolution of fashion clothes in the Philippines. The first one is the Archaic epoch in 10th to 16th century. During the Archaic epoch, before the colonizer from Europe reached the islands, the different tribes and kingdoms wore their respective clothing. The Filipino style of clothing had been dictated by the tropical climate in the Philippines with the dry and rainy seasons. Early Filipinos as well as the still extant tribal groups in the Philippines wore colorful woven clothes often with intricate beadwork and ornaments. The second one is the Spanish era, New Spain 1521 to 1799. When the Spaniards came and settled in the country, the fashion changed drastically as the Spanish culture influenced the succeeding centuries of Philippine history. The Spanish dissolved the kingdoms and united the country, resulting in a mixture of cultures from different ethnic groups and Spanish culture. Throughout the 16th century up to 18th century, women wore a Hispanicized version of the barot saya composed of a bodice called camisa, often made in a pineapple fiber, or muslin, a floor-length skirt, while the men wore the barong Tagalog, a collared and buttoned lace shirt or a suit. The third one is the Spanish era, Spanish East Indies in 1800 to 1899. By the 19th century, due to the continuing influence of the Western culture, the rising economy, globalization, and exposure from the European fashion scene, the women's clothing began to have a change. By the 1850s, women's clothing was now full wide skirt that usually have long train rather than the simple floor-length skirt, a bodice called camisa, which means blouse in English, and panuelo, a big square cloth folded triangularly and worn in the Philippines like a great ruffle or collar. The women wore this kind of fashion even when the Spanish regime was finally overthrown and was replaced by the First Philippine Republic. Today, this type of clothing is now called as the Maria Clara dress, named after the character of Maria Clara from Dr. Jose Rizal's novel Noli Me Tangere, who became a symbol of traditional Filipino women known as modest, elegant, and conservative.
Proceed to American era in 1900s to 1920s. The women then wore the traje de mestiza, the more modern version of the Maria Clara. It had bigger sleeves and a narrower floor-length skirt with a long train called saya de copa and replaced the full wide skirt reflecting the Edwardian fashion of the West. By the 1920s, the style of the skirt still remained, influenced by the flapper dress. However, the wide sleeves had been replaced by butterfly sleeves, popularized by local couturer Pasita Longos, and the big panuelo reduced its size. In Commonwealth era and Second World War in 1930s to 1940s. During the mid-1940s, the clothing boutiques, tailoring shops, and dressmakers stopped decoration as the final chapter of the World War II occurred in the Philippines. The capital city of Manila was bombed and was left 50% destroyed and was considered being the second most devastated capital city in World War II. After the war, most of the people either lost their clothes or could not find new clothes. In 1946, the country began its reparation and Manila's restoration. However, the lack of dressmakers made the fashion of the 1930s and early 1940s remain popular for the rest of the decade. 1950 to 2000. By the late 1950s, women started to wear dresses and with floral prints and the fuller knee-length skirts. Men's fashion changed slightly as the men started wearing youthful clothing such as sweaters, colorful printed polos, and pants. When the 1960s entered, most of the styles from the late 1950s still remain. A new kind of dress invented by Mary Van called the miniskirt. Mini dresses started to become popular and most style fashions also emerged. Men's fashion shifted towards a more youthful vibe. The early 1970s, the women start to abandon mini dresses for a more modest clothing. Men started wearing t-shirts, which replaced the formal look. Denim jeans also started to emerge as well as sweatshirts. When the disco culture emerged, the bell bottoms became a staple. It came up with different bright colors as well as the polos and scarves. In 1980, due to the power dressing movement, women, usually young adults, also started to wear clothes with shoulder pads while teenagers started wearing neon-colored clothes. Miniskirts also came back in popularity. Hairstyles were also emphasized as most women had their hair curled. The 1990s fashion was a laid-back version of the 1980s fashion. This decade saw the beginning of the influence of rock music to mainstream fashion. Men started to wear dark, simple, and mostly oversized clothing, moving away to the brightly colored clothes of the 1950s. 2000s, fashion was considered a mash-up of different styles with hip-hop inspired of clothing, wearing cargo pants and oversized shirts. 2010. By the mid-2010, many of the fashions from the mid-1960s and mid-1990s returned. Clothing such as miniskirts, denim jackets, knitted sweaters, boat shoes, and etc. came back into fashion, while fashion pieces like chokers gained prominence once again. Men's fashion also started to move away to the rock or hip-hop influenced styles of the past 2 decades and started to define a new style for men.
My name is Melissa T. Bautista.
I am Princess Gabrielle.
Thank you for watching. Looking onto all of this, including this competition, we cannot neglect that change is inevitable. Things are evolving while some are modified, innovated, and adapted. All of these are components of change, but there is one thing that we should not forget, and that is its historical roots. History must not be taken for granted and forgotten. It's what defines Filipinos and makes them distinct among other nations. Thank you for listening.